Hey guys, welcome to Audio Production Techniques. We're going to go ahead and get started here. Glad to see you guys hanging out this evening, and hopefully you guys are having fun with your project. So let's go ahead and just start off by seeing if you guys might have some questions before we get down to business tonight. How about some questions from the class? No questions? Come on, somebody's going to have a question. Yeah, go ahead, one question. Um, Derek's saying he's got a problem getting his book. The easiest way, I wish I could help you out with that, Derek. The best way to get your book is to contact FSO support. Um, Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do to get you your book. It has to do with just basically we're different departments, and so you'll need to get it through FSO support, and they've got a way they should be able to get it to you within 24 hours. So it's pretty much as easy as contacting them. Cool. Let me scroll up here. There's a couple questions. Let's see. Oh, good question. One, the discussion post and your PTA assignment, you'll find that actually most of your assignments for this week are actually still blank. And that is actually due to the fact that I'm still doing last minute final tweaks and adjustments to them. I'm basically overhauling pretty much the entire course. Of course, we're still dealing with the same topics. We're still dealing with Pro Tools and how to navigate and to get around through the application. But it's been pretty much just rewritten from top to bottom. And the reason for that was that we were finding that most students were waiting to the very last week to even get started on their final project. And it it's not going to do you any justice to wait to the very last week. We're hoping that, and that's why I've created some assignments that require you to go ahead and get on Indaba and get your files from Indaba, get them downloaded into Pro Tools, and get me a screenshot of them. You guys saw that within week one. Giving me a screenshot showing me that you've gone ahead and got the files in, adjusted your tempo, and you had markers. Just as you can see, we've got in the session here now, we've got an outline. And for those of you that were with us from the earlier weeks, the outline there at top showing the song structure using markers is really going to help out when we start placing things around. You can see just in the example here with Pro Tools, it was real easy to just take the loop that I thought might work in the bridge section and just move it right on down to where the bridge section is, because everything's already locked up tempo-wise and we already have markers. So it's real easy to define where things are going to go. You're going to find tonight we're going to move along pretty fast. We're going to pick up the pace here quite a bit. Excellent. Some of you guys are saying that, yeah, there are no instructions for several of your assignments right now. If I don't have them completed before tomorrow morning, which means I'll be up pretty late tonight getting some of this done. If I don't have the discussion post up and ready, then there is a possibility that I'm just going to move that date back for everyone. I already know what the topic is on the discussion post. That I can go ahead and just tell you right now that the topic for the discussion post is really going to deal with session management, and it's going to deal with a paper that has been passed down by the producers and engineering wing that outlines the way sessions should be delivered. And the reason for that is there's been a lot of discussion in the industry as far as how projects are delivered. A lot of times, as you can see, we've made sure that everything's been named. There's some naming things we need to go back and name, like some of these loops that you're seeing here. I'm going to go back and name that so it looks a little cleaner here. I don't need the extraneous numbers. There's actually tempo information at the beginning of that file, but I don't really need that kind of stuff. So I'm going to end up going back and changing things like that. Typically in the past, people were getting sessions delivered to them with nothing named, and of course, if you create, here's a good question: if you create a track inside of Pro Tools and then you don't name it, what's the name of that track going to be by default? Maybe you guys have already experienced this because you've made some tracks, you didn't name them immediately. So what's that track get named if you don't name it? It actually will make it named whatever the track is. So if it's an audio track, it'd be audio 1, audio 2, audio 3. Yeah, audio. So imagine you got delivered a very large session, and so far our session's not too big. If we go back, I'm going to cancel this right now. If we go back and actually look, we can kind of see what's going on here. Let me disconnect from a couple things. Um, you can see we've got tracks here, and they're all nicely labeled. Again, I'm going to go back and relabel these so they look a little cleaner, because right now it's hard to really tell what they are. I already know what they are because I was working on the session. But if you turn this over to somebody else and they were looking at this, it's not real easy to determine what these are. Of course, we could go back and we could solo out each track and listen to it and then relabel it. But that's not what a mix engineer wants. If you're handing off something to a mix engineer or even someone to master, they want everything to already be labeled. That way, if they have to make any kind of adjustment or changes, they already can quickly and easily see what track they need to go start dealing with. And right now, we're not doing too bad of a job. Again, there's several tracks here. I'd clean all these up. I'm going to highlight them so you guys can see them. But yeah, this just happened because they got, in this case, when we imported the file into a track, the track took its name based off of the file name. And so we'll end up going back and cleaning this up here in a little bit. But just kind of giving you guys some examples of why we do things a certain way, and that's really the answer right there, is just to clean things up. So I can already kind of tell you what this week's discussion post is going to be about. You guys might have noticed that I opted, since I'm having you guys do discussion posts every single week, I've tried to make them kind of fun and entertaining. Last week's discussion post didn't really have anything to do with Pro Tools per se, but it did kind of lend itself to make you think a little bit more about instruments that are used in dance music. And not that you even have to use any of those, an 808, 909, or a 303, but it's interesting to kind of know the lay of the land and realize how we got to where we want to be. So in this week's, we're going to be dealing with session management, and I'm basically going to give you a document, a PDF document, which you guys can actually already Google if you wanted to. We've added an addendum to the document, so we changed it slightly. In fact, actually, if you guys wanted to, you could actually find that document. I actually have already included it in your references tab. So let's see here. If I want to go find the exact document, I can do that for you. Give me one moment. I'll log in. Now you guys will see behind the curtains a little bit here. My login's going to look a little different from what you guys would see, but I'll kind of just show you what you guys would normally see. Because this is going to look like you're looking behind the curtain here. So this is what you guys are going to see. Oh, nice. Let's try that again. Sorry, guys. It might be due to the fact that I'm streaming. I'm not sure. I don't usually log in while I'm streaming. Let's go back. Oh, I know what's going on here. Give me 1 second, guys. Well, I tell you what, I have another way I can actually access this. Oh, nice. Okay. Well, I'll just guide you to, if you go look at your references tab, there is a document there that I'm going to include in the assignment as well. And I went ahead and put it there. That way you've got it. And that document basically is the outline of what the discussion post will be about. And it really just has to do with managing your session and having things labeled. Something we'll talk about a little bit more in depth next week, because we're going to be putting things together to actually get it to be delivered to me. We're also going to use something a little bit different. The session is going to be way too large for you guys to upload to FSO. So again, we'll talk more in depth about this. But if you go here to your file and you have send to, and there you have Gobbler. So now it kind of makes sense on why at the very first of the month, I went ahead and got you guys make sure that you already had a Gobbler account and that you had your code so you could get the files to me. Gobbler's a really cool delivery method. What this is going to do is it's actually going to package everything inside one folder, and then you'll just end up emailing it to me. So if I go ahead and click on Send to Gobbler, it's going to launch Gobbler right now. Let me see if I remember my password. It didn't look like Gobbler launched. Let's take a look. That's funny. A lot of things aren't going right for me all of a sudden. Let's try that again. Oh, here we go. Gobbler's launching the background. Okay. So this is an outline. It shows me a bunch of different sessions that I have, but it's going to take this specific session that I have right now. And here's the old email. All I'd have to do is put in whatever email address I need this to go to. Basically, what this does is it uploads it to Gobbler. You guys can see that your accounts will give you guys 50 gigabytes, which will be plenty. Your sessions will probably only be somewhere between 2 to 8 gigabytes. I'll be needing to manage all of your sessions, so you can see I have a slightly larger file size limitation of 100 gigabytes, so I can manage all of your sessions. Now, why we're using Gobbler? The reason we're using Gobbler is you might have noticed on your PTA assignments, I'm asking you guys to perform an archive. And there have been a couple students, not many, that have done an incorrect archive. And if you send me an incorrect archive, typically you'd be leaving out probably your audio files folder. And that's going to really create havoc when I go to grade your assignments, because then I'd have to email you letting you know that you've got items that are missing. Gobbler will actually take care of all that file management for you. It'll actually take everything in your session, even if it wasn't actually in your audio files folder. I'm going to go ahead and close out of this for right now. I just want to give you a quick idea of why we're using Gobbler. And this is quickly becoming an industry standard method of delivery. Now, the reason for that is that let's go ahead and just show you here. File, save, copy, in. Now, I've been asking you guys to use this, and for the most part, 90% of you guys have all got it done right, which is really kind of surprised me, and I'm really glad to see this. And here is the major item. If you don't check this off, all audio files, then what you end up sending me is you just send me a session file, and I open it up, and everything inside of Pro Tools is blank, and that's never good. So in an effort to try to cut down on that very last thing that you guys have been working on all month long, and to avoid all the confrontation of me trying to get in touch with you to get the files, we've gone ahead and just created your Gobbler account, and that's the way you'll send me this final project that we're working on. So your PTA assignments, since they're so small and they'll fit on FSO, and that was done intentionally as well, uh, you're just simply using this method, save, copy, in. So we call this an archive, a complete archive. So yeah, there are a couple things that you're going to see this week that for right now they're blank. And the only pressing one that we really probably have to worry about for right now that would give us any form of a time constraint would be that Wednesday discussion post. But just to clue you in, that's what it's going to be about. It's actually going to be about the producers and engineering swing session management. And again, I've made sure that I didn't make these 500 words. It's hard enough to write about something even when you are interested in it. And since you guys are doing one of these a week, I've made them really short. 200 words isn't bad. You can cram in 200 words in a couple paragraphs. So I didn't want you guys taking an exorbitant amount of time away to try to do what ends up being English composition. I really want you guys to spend time in Pro Tools and have fun with this. So good questions. How about some more questions? All right, looks like we're slowing down on the question side. So if there really aren't any more questions, then we're probably going to go ahead and just get us started. Tonight we're going to have fun. We're going to start delving into MIDI. And last week we used some loops to kind of give ourselves a little bit of an outline of the song. you're going to find that I'm probably going to ditch most of these loops for right now. We might actually come back and revisit these loops, and I'll show you what I'll end up doing usually with my loops. I usually don't use the loops throughout the whole song. Sometimes I do. Like you'll find out here in a moment, we're going to make our own beat tonight, and that'll be one of the first things we do. But sometimes making your own beat, it seems like a great idea and it sounds like a lot of fun, and it will be a lot of fun. But sometimes you find that it just doesn't come off as good as some of the other materials that you were importing. So that's going to be totally up to you, but we're going to go ahead and do that now. So let's go ahead and get started. In doing that, notice I've gone ahead and highlighted all the tracks that are dealing with the loops that I imported. And you know what? Let's go ahead and actually label these while we were talking about it earlier, because I don't think we want to keep working like this, not knowing what each file is. I believe this top one up top here, I filtered a bunch of stuff out. Let's give it a quick listen, and that way I can label it properly. We're going to call that main loop. It's just basically a naked loop. Also probably want to turn on my key caster. That way you guys can see any of the key commands I'm doing. So let me go ahead and do that for you right now. All right, so as soon as Keycaster launches here, you guys should be able to see in the bottom right-hand corner. You guys can actually see whatever I'm doing as far as key commands. So we'll go back over here into Pro Tools. So yeah, this is just that main loop. It didn't have anything else in it, so we're just going to call it main loop. And below that, I had the filtered out loop. I'll go ahead and let you listen to that. That's one where we sucked basically all the low end out of it, but we used it just to kind of complement the loop. So we'll call this support loop. I like to keep things capitalized. Notice I missed that capitalization there. The reason I do that is because you notice it really kind of jumps out at you when you have things labeled well and they look good. While I'm in this naming area, notice I didn't actually have to hit OK. I could have actually used Command and arrow keys to get to the adjacent tracks. So that's something we could do also. We'll leave this one called Hardcore. I don't need it called Hardcore Drums. We'll call it Hardcore Loop. That way it's really easy for me to tell the difference between what's a loop and what's not a loop. Yeah, that happened in my bridge. Now I have this little section down here that was used as an intro. And I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup on it as well. We already can see what it was used through, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to consolidate it. Shift return. Notice whenever I want to make a large selection back to the beginning, if I just select any one of these and hold down Shift and return, it'll make a selection all the way back to the beginning. That's a full 16 bars. I don't really need a big 16 bar. All the song is pretty much done in sections of 8. So I'm going to go ahead and just consolidate for a section of 8 bars. And you can see up top here, it shows me right there that I have 8 bars selected. Now, what is it I need to do if I want to make these all one piece? I might have already just said it a second ago. So if I want all these little individual regions to turn into one big region, I want to do this feature. Oh, Matthew, nice. Matthew came out with the quick key. Yes, consolidate. Excellent. So the quick key, Command Shift 3, and I'll go ahead and just show you what I'm doing. I'm going up to track here. I'm sorry, clip. And actually, this might be under edit. Consolidate clip. So this is basically what we're doing. So if you don't remember the quick key, that's okay. It's awesome that you did, by the way. Killer. But I don't care how you do it. I just want to know that you can do it. And then just go ahead and duplicate it over. That way, I've got that there for me. And since I use that as just the intro, we're going to call it intro loop. And typically, if I use something as the intro, I usually use it as the outro as well. So I could go ahead and just pull this down there to the end, changing my grid resolution. I used a quick key to do that. If you hold down Control Option and you use your plus minus keys, That's going to change your grid. You can see it's changing it up top here. So if you don't remember the quick key, that's okay too. Just right up top. There you go. I just took it to 1 bar increments. That way when I option drag this, option dragging will copy it. But you can see it easily puts it over exactly where I need it to go. So it fills out to the end of the song. And then what I typically would probably do is just like we did in the beginning there, is I'd consolidate these pieces here and then create a fade out on them. So again, Shift Option 3, consolidate. We'll zoom in on them a little bit here and take a look at them. And then create a fade out of some kind. And I'm just basically trying to repeat what I did at the beginning of the song. And notice that I'm using my Smart tool. So if my Smart tool is at the very top leading right-hand corner, it becomes a fade out. And that way when we fade the song out, I'll go ahead and let you listen from the bridge on. You'll get an idea of what we just did. And then we're going to move away from dealing with our loops. I'm probably going to end up just inactivating these tracks, but let's just let you hear what we got going so far. On solo. Hey Juan, you actually just gave me a really good idea. You said the slow down the bridge. It's actually the same tempo, it's just a different beat. But you gave me a really good idea. I actually like to do this. Let me actually show you a really cool little trick that you just kind of tipped me off to. Now, I'm going to show you something that you got to be careful with. You got to make sure that the loop already locks into the tempo, and we already know it does, so we're good there. But I want to show you this thing called TCE, time compression expansion. If we listen to this loop just by itself, I want to let you hear what it sounds like. And that way you can kind of get an idea of what it is we're doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make this loop slow down by half of its time. I'm going to go up to my, what would typically be my trim tool, and hold down on it. And you'll see here you have this thing called TCE, time compression expansion. And with this tool, it's going to allow me to stretch audio. I could actually make the audio faster by making it shorter. When you listen to this, it's going to double time the audio and make it faster. But that's not actually what I was looking for. So I'm going to undo that, Command C. And I want to make it twice of its distance. So if it was originally 2 bars long, I want it to be 4 bars long. When I do this, listen to how this actually slowed it down, but it'll actually still work with the composition. So if our original tempo, I believe, was 106, let's take a look. I'm looking here. Tempo, yeah, 106 beats per minute. This right here, even though it fits within our 106 beats per minute, it's going to be half that. So what are you looking at there? 53 beats per minute. We'll take a listen to what we just did. So that's kind of cool, right? Let's actually put it back to its original and watch what we'll do with this. I'll duplicate it just to go back the way it was originally. And we'll use that as the outro. I'm going to drag it over here, and we'll do the same thing, that whole slowdown effect. That way when we're leaving the song, it'll give us that effect. So all I'm going to do is just stretch it to be 4 bars long, and then duplicate it over. And this will make it kind of interesting because the main beat already faded out anyway. So when we come into this section, here, I'll go ahead and play it over for you again. Yeah, you get the idea. Yeah, so nice little trick there, and thanks for tipping me off to that one. I forgot about that one. I haven't done that one in a while. I like the little half tempo stuff. Um, just so you can get an idea too, this half tempo stuff actually works with other loops. So if we go back and we solo out that half tempo and let you hear it with the other loops, it'll actually still work out. Take a listen to this. It's really cool. It kind of creates this little backbeat. Okay, yeah, good question. What you're basically doing, Juan says here, so after you hold down the trim tool and select TC, is the effect automatically applied? No, it's not. Let me grab a loop here and we'll just pull it off to the end of our session where we're not really doing anything, that we've just kind of got a workspace. Notice here with the TCE tool, normally with the trim tool, if we go back to just standard trim tool, you grab it and you trim, right? Of course, it's locking to the grid, so it just trims to the grid. But in this case, we're actually stretching the audio, time compression or expanding. So in this case, we're expanding it to be twice its original length. Now, there are some artifacts to this. If you go back and listen to it, I just basically clicked and drug it. So just clicking and dragging, and notice it's locking to the grid. And in this case, you didn't hear a whole lot of artifacts. If I go and grab this other loop where there's a lot more kind of material involved in the loop and perform the same thing, you're probably going to hear a little bit more. So this is actually a destructive process. You are actually destructively editing the audio. And if we go back and listen to this, I think you will hear some artifacts on this one. We'll get rid of the top one, so you're just focusing on the one that's highlighted. I'm not sure if that's going to translate through the speakers, but there's definitely some degradation to the audio. So what is it we're really doing? Well, the DAW has recorded into the DAW whatever sample rate and bit depth. So I liken this to, remember, it's samples per second, right? So let's take that and say that we're really dealing with audio as a loaf of bread. And the reason I'm using the example of a loaf of bread is because we're all familiar with slices of a bread. And that's kind of what we're doing here. We're dealing with slices of audio, 44,100 slices per second. Now, in this case, we're actually stretching it out. We're stretching out the loaf of bread to where there's actually gaps in between the samples because we made it longer than its original length. When it does that, it can't just leave gaps. You would hear clips and pops. You can't just have dead air. So it has to then synthesize what it thinks the audio should have sounded like. So imagine if in between each slice of bread, we had to synthesize the bread and make something that was kind of like bread, but not real bread, but it had to be palatable like bread, so that you would listen to it and discern that it's audio and enjoyable and pleasing. So in this case, the actual computer has to then render, or Pro Tools has to render what it thinks should have gone in between each of those samples to then give you something that sounds palatable or sounds like audio. Now, if we actually listen to these two together, this will kind of sound interesting because now it's halftime. And if I wanted to, we could actually go and grab the original loops. Let me fill that back in where I missed a spot there. And just for fun, I'll put these loops kind of underneath the ones that are already there. I'm not going to leave it this way. I just want you guys to hear what it would sound like with the original beat or the original loops and then the time stretch material. So the time stretch stuff you can see up top, it's been pulled apart. And this is the original loop with that. We'll go ahead and play this back. It's kind of cool because they're both the same material but just used in a different way. So have fun with TCE. I just figured I'd show it to you real quick. You kind of just spurred inspiration there when you mentioned that it sounded like it slowed down. So I wanted to show you how you actually can slow it down and still make it workable in your session. We'll delete this. I just want to use that as a placeholder, kind of give you guys some examples of things you could do with your audio. Now, I'm going to abandon all the loops that we've worked on so far. Yeah, absolutely, Juan. It was a very good question, man. I'm glad that you brought that up. It kind of gave me some ideas and some thoughts of different things we could do. For right now, these tracks that I have highlighted deal with all of my loops. We can see them real nice and clean now that we've renamed them, so everything looks real good. Some of these other ones, I don't really like the underscores in here. Sometimes I would go through probably and get rid of those, but for right now, we'll just leave them. I'm not going to count you off on that. You can tell it's synth lead 1, 2, and pads, so that's fine. That's probably the way the original files were imported. And typically the reason people put the underscores in between the words is because certain, like a Mac and PC, that doesn't deal with gaps very well, so they deal with underscores. I'll probably end up going back and changing them because Pro Tools is just fine without having those underscores. For right now, what I want them to do, before I get myself sidetracked again, is I actually want to get rid of all these loops. We'll probably bring this back here in a moment, but I actually want us to start over fresh and create our own loop and kind of give you guys a way to give you some inspiration on creating your own stuff. Somebody mentioned to me, I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, wait a minute, isn't loops cheating? If all your composition always deals in loops, well, there's artists that do that all day long and they still sell records. But I do understand the belief in creating your own stuff. So let's do that now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click. And when I right click on this, we're going to ask to hide them and make them inactive. Cool. Now, what did that really do? If we take a look here, notice those items are still there. We could actually show them in view again, but you'll notice they're going to be grayed out now. So whenever you see something grayed out in Pro Tools, you know that it's not active. So all the waveforms and the regions and the tracks themselves are grayed out, letting you know that they're no longer active. If we look in our mix window, they're grayed out as well. So if you ever have a session that tracks are grayed out like that, you know that they're inactive tracks. Now, I inactivated them just for us, so we don't have to really see them or deal with them anymore. And in fact, I'm going to hide all my tracks for right now. And let's jump into some MIDI. So now we've got a couple topics we want to hit on here today. And I know you guys have probably heard this in the past, but I think it's important to go ahead and get this out in the open. If I were to say MIDI is not, what would be the next word in the sentence? MIDI is not what? It's not blank. What is MIDI? MIDI is not. Yeah, MIDI's not audio. It's not sound. MIDI is information. It's meant to trigger sound. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a MIDI track. And at first I want to explain to you, I'm actually going to do something in somewhat of an old school fashion. Because we're going to talk about MIDI tracks today. We're going to talk about aux tracks today. And then we're going to deal with instrument tracks. But first, I want to kind of show you the old school way. Yeah, somebody once says MIDI is data. That is what MIDI is. It's really data. It's data that's going to be triggering a specific device. It may be a virtual instrument or it may be a hardware instrument. Nowadays, I used to have tons and tons of synths. I do everything inside of Pro Tools. But if you want to trigger your hardware device, this would be the way you would do it. You'd want to use MIDI. So let's create a MIDI track. And let's also create a stereo aux track. Okay, so I've got both my tracks here. And it's time to figure out what it is I want to trigger. I'm going to decide that I want to trigger a virtual instrument. Let's take a look at the mix window. This might be a little easier to figure out here. So I'm going to look underneath my inserts on my aux track, and there's a reason why I'm putting the virtual instrument on the aux track. Well, number one, notice I can't put it on a MIDI track. I can't put it on a MIDI track because MIDI's not audio. No audio will ever pass through a MIDI track. But we can put it on an aux track because aux tracks handle audio. And they'll handle audio coming from a virtual instrument as well. So let's go over here. We'll go down to where I have my instruments, and I'm going to pull up. An expand, and this is something that you all have. This is a virtual instrument that comes with Pro Tools, and it's a really good little virtual instrument. Expand. Think of expand as like okay. I don't know if you guys saw that, but I had a little bit of a beach ball going there. Anytime I have a beach ball, I'm going to do a save. And in fact, let's go ahead and do a save as. And let's save it as, we can see I already have version 2 in there. And this one's already named version 2. Let's name it version 3. I'm just doing that way if something happens, we don't lose our work. Because there's nothing more infuriating than working on a project for several hours and then losing your work. Something I've also engaged here as well is underneath your setups and underneath preferences. We have a dialog here that helps us save. So I've enabled auto backup, and I'm asking it to back up every single minute. So that's going to be quite a lot of backups. So I've delineated here to only keep the 10 most recent backups, but that way if something does go down in front of you guys, I'm not left standing naked with no work left. I have a way of actually getting back to at least some of my previous work. So it's not a bad idea to consider this, especially if you're working with a client. There's nothing that'll make your client more upset than if you've been working with them for hours and then Pro Tools crashes and you lose all your work. So just a quick note. Now I was talking about Expand here. So Expand is a virtual instrument, and it's a meat and potatoes virtual instrument. What do I mean by that? Well, it's got basically anything you'd want to use inside of your DAW, whether it be real pianos or synthetic pianos, they have them in here. If you want real drum sounds or electronic drum kits, they have them in here. If you want a real horn sound or a synthesized horn sound, it's going to be in here. Now, how realistic are they? They're pretty good. It's not bad. But some virtual instruments that deal with just nothing but virtual analog is not going to have a real piano sound. So anytime you're trying to find something that's more of a natural sound, it's not a bad plugin to go to. I'm going to go inside of the presets here. You'll notice here there's categories. And inside each category, there's different patches you can pick. So let's go underneath our drums. And let's go find... let's start off with the electro. I might not end up sticking with this one. Let me see if there's something else I really like. Yeah, we'll just go with... electro is fine for now. I may decide that I'm going to go back and change this up. But for right now, we'll just pick the electro patch. You can see that it's loaded multiple banks here inside of my virtual instrument. But if I hit my keyboard, I'm not getting any sound. I've got my keyboard sitting off to the side here. You guys can't see it, but I've got a keyboard here. I'm beating on the keyboard. I got no sound. Now, why is that? How come I'm not just hearing it immediately? Okay, good. Matthew's thinking inputs and outputs. Not a bad place to look. And what's really going on here, it has to do with the output of the MIDI track. Well, number one, I want to record arm the track. That way it understands this is the track I'm using. Now you can see I have MIDI. So we've got MIDI. Yeah, there we go. Brian nailed it. Look inside the MIDI output. Right now it's trying to trigger something called the laboratory or some extraneous device. I want to try to trigger the expand. So you've got to tell the output of your MIDI track what it is you want to trigger. And now I should actually have sound. Cool, I've got sound, so we're halfway there. So just understand that the MIDI information on here, whenever we saw that MIDI signal is now traveling over and it's triggering this virtual instrument. So it's got to be given a pathway of what it is that you want to trigger. Now that it's all set up to trigger, now it's time to go create a pattern inside of Pro Tools. So let's do that. Let's go over here to the MIDI track itself. And I picked 4 bars. We'll probably do a little 4-bar section here. Actually, let's start ourselves off really small. Let's start ourselves off with just a 1-bar selection just for now. We'll expand the view. Now, I want you to understand that your MIDI tracks, we'll make these a little bit larger. They default to showing you clips view, but clips view is not what I want to use. I actually want to look at the individual notes view. And then I want to change my grid resolution. Let's change it to 16th notes. And I'm going to scroll down to my my C, but my first C. So what I mean by that, I mean here's the key of C. Here's my drum, and I can already tell I'm not really happy with the kick drum sound. So I'm probably going to have to go change the patch here in a moment. But for right now, we'll just write a really simple rhythm. So I can see I'm just clicking on the key here, C1. So I know my kick's there. And with all the virtual instruments and expand, your kick's always going to be on C1. So we'll go ahead and we'll just write that in. By the way, if you ever don't know what an actual key is, notice if you hover over any spot where there is a blank spot, you can see right up top here, right here, it's actually showing me the note value. So I can, if I write that in, there's C1. And if I hover over C1, you can see right up top here, it shows me what that is. So if you're ever forgetful, you don't remember what key you're actually dealing with, it'll actually show you right there. So I've got kicks in there. Now it's time to write some snares in. Snares are typically going to be right in the same neighborhood. There's clap. Well, you just use the standard snare for right now. And then let's go put in some closed hats. Very similar to what you guys did on your PTA assignment, except for you guys imported these. We'll go and scroll and find closed hats. There we go, there's closed hats. Now, if I switch my tool to the line tool, and I click and drag, it'll create a series of notes for me based off of whatever the grid is. That way it's real easy for me to just write those in, and we'll listen to what I just created. Now, don't laugh. This beat's not going to sound too hot right in the beginning, but I'm just showing a really easy way to get yourself started if you're not familiar with writing a beat. So we'll solo this out so we can hear these parts just by themselves. Really boring beat, and in fact, I'm not real happy with the sound. So I'm going to go find a different kit. Okay, so notice that once I have the pattern already set for the virtual instrument, I can actually just go switch up the patches to figure out if something sounds a little bit more like what I'm looking for. And in this case, this works out a whole lot better. It's really, really boring beat though. So let's actually make this a little bit more fun. Now the reason I showed you this boring beat is because I wanted to show you a quick and easy way. You're always going to have your kick on the 1-1, 2-1, the 3-1, and then the 4-1. And then you want to put your snare at bar 1, beat 2, and a snare at bar 1, beat 4. And then just find your hats and scribble them in. Now, that didn't sound real hot to begin with, but let's create more of a breakbeat feel to it. And to do that, we just go ahead and we write some notes in, and we also move some notes around. So let's put in, let's ask this guy to be there, and that guy to be there, and maybe even move this over to here. Let's give it a quick listen. So all I did is just move the kicks around so far. And immediately we've changed up the rhythm, but I think it could use a little bit more work. How about that guy goes there? This guy sounds like he needs to go away entirely. And now I'm just going to listen to it, and I'm going to start playing with it while I'm listening to it. So notice all I've really done so far is just move some kicks around. And that real repetitive hi-hat is going to just start annoying me pretty quickly. So let's get rid of some of them. Typically, I like to do every other, and then give a little bit of different pattern towards the end, and go back and give it a listen. And typically, I would also do this while I'm auditioning it. Not bad. Let's duplicate that once. And let's change it up a little bit as we go along here. For instance, change up the hi-hat pattern slightly. Here I'm just going to go every time I don't see a drum hit, we're just going to change it up. So we're basically just filling in a spot. If there's no drum hit there, I'm going to make sure that we've got one. So there, this one can go away because there is a hit. That one can go away because there's already a hit. So I'm just trying to change it up so it's not the same exact pattern. And it'll make it a lot more interesting. We'll also move this kick around. And let's go back and give it a listen. And if we go back and we listen from the beginning, so now we already have 2 bars built. There's a spot I missed here. I want to make sure anytime there's not a drum hit, we've got something there as a placeholder. So let's put one there. And that looks good. Let's actually take the first section here. Let's copy it, Command-C. And then let's paste it, Command-V for bar 3. But then let's change it up a little bit again. So far I've almost got 3 bars here. We're going to do 4 bars and probably do a little bit of a copy and paste. So let's take a listen. And this time I'm just going to move things around while it's playing back. And I'm happy with that. Let's take that and let's copy that. So I'm just going to highlight over it and duplicate. And on this last one, since we've now got 4 bars, I always like to do a little bit of extra rhythm part towards the end because it's going to help accentuate into the next section. So I'll take the snare, maybe do a couple extra snares, and also probably give it a couple more hi-hat pieces. We'll do every other one. That looks good. And a lot of extra hi-hats. So this should help it turn around. Let's take a listen to it real quick. Now, if we listen to what we've got here, I've got 4 bars. And let's just give it a quick listen and see if this passes the mustard test. And you notice how the couple extra snares there at the back end helps turn it around, so it helps resolve itself. Now remember, this song is really dealing with movements in 8-bar sections. So that's nice that we have a little turnaround at the 4-bar measure, but where we really want to be concerned with is at the 8 bar. So let's go ahead and duplicate it. And I'm going to do some extra snare work at the very last bar measure here. And we're just going to add in throughout here some extra snares. So I'm actually going to do this while it's playing back. It'll help me hear what I've got going on a little bit better. There you go. Now what that did is that just helped the turnaround at the 8-bar measure. So when this loops, it's going to sound like it belongs there, and it'll work throughout the sections. Let's go back and listen to it, and then let's throw it into the song. I'm just going to listen to it dry. That way we can get an idea of what it sounds like. Nice, cool. So just for funsies, not for keeps, let's go ahead and let's paste this throughout the song. Let's pull up all the other tracks. Um, let's take a look at the song structure for all the other tracks. And you can see we've got the MIDI down at the bottom that I just created. Let's go ahead and just duplicate it out for the length of the song. And let's see how this works in conjunction with the actual song itself. So let's unsolo these pieces and let's take a quick listen. I'm not going to listen to the entire song all the way through, but we got to get a good idea for how good this is going to work or if it's not working. So we need to hear it in congruence with the song itself. I'm also going to turn up the output for the aux track where the sound is coming from because we want to be able to hear it over top the music. And I'm noticing the level on here is probably not going to do it unless we turn it up slightly. Let's take a listen. Whoa. Sounds good. Did you guys notice the turnaround portions where I added in the extra snares? Did you hear how they help walk into each of these sections where we see the markers and help introduce those new parts? Did you guys notice that? Any takers? You guys still there? Okay, cool. All right. It's really important in your process to think about those things. When I created the stencil for this song, when we blocked it out, I paid attention to the fact that into each of these sections it was 8-bar measures, and just by knowing that, it let me know that in my rhythm part here, when I'm going to duplicate this out, let's zoom into it a little bit so we can see it a little bit bigger. It let me know that I need to have something happen that happens towards the end here. We'll zoom down here to my MIDI notes. That would allow that extra turnaround to happen, and it's just the extra couple of snares. We did some of the 4-bar measure just to keep it interesting, so it doesn't sound too loopy, and also did some on the back end at the turnaround where I know it's going to walk into a new section. So that really helped it out. I'm going to pull it up and we'll just listen to it go into that section, and we're just thinking about these parts right here, and all it is a couple extra snares. Okay, cool. All right, so now comes the tedious task of recording this down to audio. When I say tedious, it's really not that difficult, but we are going to run into a couple problems when we do this. Let me hide all tracks so we can focus in on just the tracks we're dealing with. And again, even in my own productions, I typically will hide the tracks that I'm not dealing with, because all I really want to see is the drum section that I'm working with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to record down the first 8 bars, because I don't need to record down the whole song. We only are dealing with 8 bars worth of information. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to highlight the first 8 bars. I'm confirming that I've got 8 bars selected. Cool. So I know that if I just record that and duplicate it, then I don't have to record the entire length of the song, and we'll just duplicate the recorded audio. So let's show you how to do that. I like to show it to you in the mix window. That way you guys get respect for just the whole mix environment and how the audio is flowing through Pro Tools. Let's go ahead and create, since the source is stereo, in this case I'm going to create stereo. And I'm only doing it because the source coming out of here is stereo. So I'm going to create a stereo audio track. And let's record this. Well, I know I've got to get the sound. The sound isn't coming from the MIDI track. The MIDI track is triggering the expand. So the sound is coming out of the aux track, so we need to route the aux track on a bus. Notice none of my buses are in use, so I can use any bus I want to. We'll go ahead and just use bus 13 and 14. Now, all I have to do to get it recorded is just make sure the input of my audio track matches bus 13 and 14. Record arm the track. Remember, I already have a selection made. Oops, I did. Yeah, I still do. It just doesn't look like it. And all I have to do is actually start recording. Now, normally I would name this track first before recording it down, but I'm trying to just give you guys the basics of recording your MIDI to audio. And there's going to be a problem with this, so we're not going to end up actually using this track. But I just want you to be aware, usually before I would go and record, I'd go ahead and name the track, because the recorded audio on the track will take its name of the track whenever you record. So right now it's just going to be called Audio 1. But again, since I'm not going to keep this track, I'm using it as a dummy track as an example. We're going to throw it away in a minute here, and I'll explain why. Let's go ahead and record it. Okay, cool. Got the drums recorded. So you would think all is well and good. We can just duplicate this throughout the track, right? Not so. There's a problem here. Oh, by the way, notice the recorded audio did take its name based off the track. The problem that we're going to run into is, what if I want to EQ the snare different from the kick? Well, what's the problem there? Why would that be a problem? Any takers? Yeah, nice one, Brandon. It's already all in one track. Yeah, so right now, if I throw up an EQ to try to EQ just the kick, I'm EQing the kick, the snare, and the hats. That's not a win-win situation. I've now painted myself into a corner. So what needs to happen is, I need to get each of these, the hi-hat, the snare, and the kick, recorded to its own individual audio track. And this will be important. That way, if I wanted to add reverb to just the snare, then I can do that because I have it on its own individual audio track. So this is why I said this is going to be a dummy track. I'm not going to even use that. You know, Matthew, that's not a bad idea. I actually could save this loop. So if I want to do some fun with this loop and do some mangling to it, or even do some reverses, now that it's audio, we can go and do things like reversing parts. Go reverse a section, so I'll render it. Go back and listen to that. So that might not be a bad idea. We could save this loop. So if that's the case, let's go ahead and name it. I may or may not use this later, but it wasn't a bad idea, Matthew, to go ahead and save it, since we did do some work here. Let's just call it my loop for now. That way I'll remember that that's my original loop that I created. And then I'm actually going to get rid of this. I'm going to show you guys how to get these to individual tracks. And this is going to be where it becomes a little bit cumbersome, but it's a lesson worth learning. So I want to show you how to do this. If I go look over my clips bin, we should have my loop. There you go. There's my loop. So I do know I have that. So that's good. For right now, let's delete this track. I just right-click the track, and we're going to say delete. The reason why is I'm going to have these as individual tracks. And with drum parts, we don't really need to have stereo tracks. We really want to have mono tracks. I know in the loops that we imported, there were some stereo loops, but when we're talking about individual drum hits, you want to think of tracks like this. Let's take the example of bass. Bass could be, if it's coming from a synthesizer, a synth bass. Well, a synthesizer usually has two outputs, a left and a right. So in that case, that would probably be a stereo. But if we're talking about a bass guitar, well, there's only one plug that goes into a bass guitar. There's no such thing as a stereo bass guitar. So a bass guitar would just be an individual mono audio track. And the same thing with a drum. If you're going to record drums in a recording studio, well, there's only one drum mic. There's only one mic that would be for the snare as well, unless you've got top and bottom for the snare, which is common. But either way, it's not going to be considered a stereo track. So let's go ahead and let's create 3 mono audio tracks. Shift Command N to create a new track. 3 mono audio tracks. I'm going to go ahead and need to name these. So let's name it CL hat for closed hat. I'll use my daft little command arrow to get to the next track, so I don't have to get out of this window. We'll call it snare, S-N-A-R-E. Command arrow to the next track, kick, K-I-C-K. Okay, now we're posed with, well, how do we get these onto individual tracks? If we look in our mix window, this starts to become a conundrum. All of the sound is coming from one track. In fact, the MIDI, it's flying off here to hit our expand. The MIDI doesn't understand the difference between stereo audio because MIDI is not audio. So now we have a problem. We have MIDI that is triggering something coming from a stereo track that we need to get to 3 individual tracks. Now there is a way we could do this. We could actually create 3 individual MIDI tracks, copy the same pattern down to 3 individual MIDI tracks, and then on each individual MIDI track, delete the part that we don't need. But we have something that will actually do that for us, and it'll do it a lot quicker and easier. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of anything to the left of here because I really only need 8 bars, right? Earlier, I told you guys that Shift Return will select back the beginning, but that's not what we want to do. We want to select the opposite direction, so I'm going to hold Shift Option Return and then just delete all that old MIDI. And you'll see why in a minute. Again, we only needed 8 bars that we created. Now we're going to take you into the world of MIDI and MIDI operations. Underneath your event menu up top here, you want to go to event operations, which is all going to deal with your MIDI. Now, I'm going to show you a quicker way to get here as a quick key here. Anytime you're dealing with MIDI, if you hold down Option and 0, you'll be taken to your first MIDI operations window, and then command arrows will rotate through the different windows. Let me go back to the menu to kind of clarify and show what it is I just did, but show you using the menus. Event menu, event operations, and here are the options that you're going to end up using for your MIDI. Things like quantize. I know you guys are all familiar with quantize, but here we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do select and split notes. When we choose this menu, we're going to say that we want all of the notes. And by the way, anytime you're using any of these menus here, it deals with what you have that is selected in Pro Tools. So if I didn't have anything selected in Pro Tools, notice this becomes grayed out, so I can't use it. So anytime you're trying to quantize or anything, you have to actually have notes selected in order to do these features. So we're going to tell it we want to do all of the notes. Then I want to split the notes, and I'm going to cut them to a new track per pitch. Now, what is that really saying? I'll explain. The snare is on one individual pitch, right? If we're looking over at the keys off to the side, the snares are all on one pitch, one specific key. The same thing with my kick. They're all on one key. So when it says a new track per pitch and to cut it, it's going to cut this information out. It's going to create the MIDI tracks that I need and put that MIDI on the individual tracks. Just saves me a lot of work. We'll go ahead and hit apply, and you'll notice it'll do the work for us. There you go. It just got rid of all those other tracks. Now I've got to pay attention to the actual routing of these. What do I mean by that? Well, if we go back and take a look in my mix window, remember the aux track that the virtual instrument on, it's going out of a specific bus, bus 13 and 14. Let's go over here and ask it to go out of just one bus. Let's just tell it to go out of bus 13. The reason for that is that same sound needs to come into these tracks. So I'm going to select the tracks, and I'm going to show you a little maneuver here called clutching. Since I know I want all of the tracks to actually be bus 13, if I hold down Shift and Option and go pick bus 13, it'll automatically take care of all of those 3 tracks, so it saved me having to do it several times. There you go, bus 13. Now all I have to do is mute out the parts that I'm not using. This isn't even in use anymore, so I can go ahead and delete that track. And it's not a bad idea to go ahead and make sure that the track's not in use. It would really stink for you to delete something and there was information there. So we'll look at it. We'll delete it. We no longer need it. Delete. Now let's make sure this is actually working. Let's go and record arm these, and let's play it back and make sure that it is coming out of this bus and going into these tracks. Okay, Now, what you just saw was you're not able to hear it, and it has to do with my record mode. If I pull up, actually, it has to do with my playback. Right now, I'm in auto input, and I know that based off this little symbol here, it's not turned on. Option K will toggle you back and forth between input only monitoring and auto input, which isn't really super useful until you're doing things like quick punch, and we're not going to be getting into quick punch this month. But now that it's set for auto input and that the tracks are record armed, I should be able to hear that beat coming out of all these, and you're going to see them come out of there. Actually, all will be the same. You'll see. Ooh, loud. Okay, so we have sound, but what we really need to get happening is just one sound. So here I should have just my hat. Let's unsolo that. But notice the hat's coming into every single track, so that's where you just record them down one at a time. So here I've got the closed hat. It's labeled closed hat, so that's what we're going to record into this track. Let's go back and just select the length of recording that we want. That way we know it's going to start and stop based off of our selection, and we'll record just the closed hat. All right, cool. We got the closed hat. Now we just need to basically rinse and repeat for the other parts. We'll mute the closed hat. We'll open up the snare track. We'll record on the next track for the snare to get recorded to, and record away. Coolio. Rinse and repeat. We're going to do this again and I like looking at the mix window. I don't know why, but it tends to help me to actually look at it here in the mix window. Notice I didn't bother naming these tracks because we're actually going to throw these away here in a little bit. We're only going to use the tracks once they're recorded to audio. Matthew was asking, is there such thing as a virtual clip? I'm not sure if I know what it is you're asking. I'm not sure what you're asking. Let me go ahead and record this down, and maybe you can just be a little bit more descriptive. I'm not really sure what you're asking. Brian, give me 1 second here. Yeah, I don't mind unmuting you. Give me 1 second. Okay, Brian, you're now unmuted. You there, Brian? Okay, Brian, you are unmuted. Not sure why we can't hear you. Matthew is saying, can software instruments can they be destroyed by recording too loud?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Now I'm finna ask a question. Right now, you recording each track one at a time?
Yes.
Okay. If we since we have buses, if we use like bus 13, 14, and 15, can you record it like that, where you can record everything at the same time?
Well, if the virtual instrument supported multiple outputs, yes. But in this case, the expand does not. So in this case, you'll have to use this method. And it's actually good to show you this because I wish that you had the individual outputs because it would save time. We wouldn't have to do them one at a time like you see me doing. But unfortunately, this virtual instrument doesn't support multiple outputs. So your question's a good one. It's just we're not able to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, good question though.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, not a problem. Okay, back to our kick. Let's see. So kick here is unmuted. It's record arm there, so we should be ready to go. Let's record away. So now we have our kick, our hat, and our snare recorded down as individual pieces. We really don't need the MIDI. Now, in this case, I'm going to save it just because for the final project, it'd be nice if you guys actually have the parts there so I know what it is. And I'll just call it, this will be closed hat MIDI, CL hat MIDI. Cool. And I'm basically just going to do the same thing for each of the tracks. This is going to be the snare. And again, I like them to be capitalized. It just helps to see when you're looking in the mix window. And then kick. Cool. So we now got everything there. I'm not even going to really use these MIDI tracks any longer, but for your final project, I'm going to want you guys to leave as much there as possible because this is something I'm going to ask that you guys do. Is I'll need 3 of your main percussive pieces to be recorded down as individual audio tracks. And then we're going to actually add some more audio as well. Notice that the beat we have is a really good beat. I actually don't mind this at all. I'm not going to say it's the best beat ever. It's not that bad, but I'm noticing it needs some filler pieces like some shakers, some tambourines, maybe even cowbell. But for right now, we're going to leave this here and go add some other loops. And then we're going to get these all down to a little bit more of a manageable percussive pieces. So let's do that now. What I'm going to do is let's solo out so we have just these parts playing, and I'm going to go find some percussive stuff. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I want to move over into the bass and start working with some more MIDI and show you guys virtual instrument tracks as well, because I showed you the old school way of using an aux track. We'll name this as well. Actually, I don't even need this aux track anymore, but let's go ahead and name it anyways. We'll call it Expand A, or Drum Expand. But we don't really need any of these tracks anymore, so we'll hide these and make them inactive. Oh, notice your MIDI tracks, because if they're not in use, notice it's not allowing me to make that inactive. So what I'll do is we'll pick just the expand track, hide that, hide that and make it inactive. And then we'll just hide these. As long as they're muted, they're not going to do anything. Cool. So now we have just our lead rhythm parts that we're going to end up using. But now I want to go in and add from the Avid sound library that you guys downloaded and go ahead and add in something like, I like tambourines a lot. I think tambourines really give a song motion, especially when we're dealing with some kind of a break rhythm. And you'd call this a breakbeat because it's more of a breakbeat pattern instead of just a standard 4 on the floor pattern. And I find that tambourines really kind of give it that party, get up and go motion. So we're going to go try to find some of those. While I'm digging through here to find that stuff, does anybody have any other questions? Hang on a second. Looks like I missed a couple here. Vance says, how did you get 3 separate controllers to enable the mute? I think what you saw me do earlier is if I have tracks highlighted and I'm holding Shift and Option, notice Shift and Option is clutching tracks that are highlighted. So in this case, I was clutching those tracks. You could also, you might have remembered a moment ago, I actually, in fact, we'll send all of these outputs. We'll say no output. So notice they all went grayed out, and I did that by holding Shift and Option, which clutched those, clutched just the tracks that were highlighted. Now, Vol, you're asking about the drum you used last week. Yeah, we've ignored my other drums. We'll see. I don't know. I'm going to show you a creative way that we could actually keep that stuff. But I was really using that as placeholders so that you guys could kind of get an idea, and you can kind of choose whichever direction you want to go. I'm going to really leave this up to you guys for how you want to make your composition. So if you want to keep the original rhythm over the one that you made, that's totally up to you. Or If you want to keep the main rhythm, the one that you created, like you're seeing here with me this evening, that's fine too. I really don't want to paint you into a corner. But yeah, I'm going to show you some other options. Typically, what I would usually do is all those other drums that we just did, I would usually put a filter on them and actually use them in the background, even hard panned left or right, just as little accent parts. And that sounds kind of crazy because that's going to be a lot of drums. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But first, let me build this whole pattern here that we're going to do together, and then we'll go back and we'll see if we can pull that off. Sometimes I'll filter them in and out throughout the song, and when I say filter them, I would just be using an EQ to let some of the frequencies in and let some of them out. But we'll see. We kind of have to play it by ear. It's kind of a situation where you're building some lasagna. You remember that last time you made lasagna, you used too much sauce. So this time you don't want to use quite as much, and it's just going to be one of those things where we have to taste it, and we'll get an idea of whether we want to use them or not. And it'll be ultimately up to you, Vol, but that's a good question. Yeah, it looks like I'm just making crazy amounts of drums, and you're probably like asking which way is this guy going with the direction. I do have a direction here, and we'll get down to it. All right, let's go use our workspace browser, which you can find underneath your Windows menu. Go to workspace. And why am I using the workspace browser? There's a specific reason why I said importing from the workspace browser is a good idea. Does anybody remember? There was something the workspace browser window would do that your other windows won't do for importing. Anybody remember what that was? Yeah, nice one, Brandon. It matches the sounds and the tempo in the session. Yep, that's it. It'll save me a lot of work here. So let's go down to sounds and samples. We'll go into my Avid sound library. Now remember, I'm just picking things arbitrarily. Hopefully this stuff works. I'm going to look under percussion. Claps, congo. Congos might be cool. Here we go, shakers. I'm really looking for tambourine. Let's look under tambourine. So I'm going to play back the loop I have. We'll solo this, so we're just hearing this. And that way I can tell if these are going to work with it or not. Make sure the MIDI metronome symbol is engaged there. Oh, I changed my output here. Every single output needs to go out to output 1 and 2. There we go. No, I like these, but I only like part of them. I noticed the pattern changes up slightly throughout them. I'm going to go ahead and get an idea of which part I like, and we're going to cut that out and use it. I think they're really off there at the beginning. In fact, it sounds like whoever's playing. The way we can actually tell is take a look at this. Put it at 16th notes and zoom in, and you'll be able to see some of these are really behind. Look how behind that is. And I could just hear that, and it kind of changed the feeling. Now, I thought they actually started sounding good from here on, but what I'm going to do, so I like this measure. I'm actually just going to get rid of these. I'm actually going to show you a way of tightening these up as well. Let's actually use this part here for the beginning. I'm just going to select a 1 bar increment. Let's make sure I got a full 1 bar. Actually, not a bar, but full beat. Let's see. Okay, I'm actually going to just edit that out. Option drag at the beginning. Let's listen to it. Okay. Now, I don't mind it being a little bit off. In fact, that little bit off gives it a little bit of a shuffle if we wanted to. I'm going to show you a way of actually tightening up the performance so it exactly matches. We pretty much hard quantized this because we drew it in as being hard quantized. So if I want that to actually follow my main rhythm a little bit more and it'll actually get in a tighter groove of being more quantized sounding, we can actually change this to analysis view. What this analysis view does is it actually shows us the individual hits and what Pro Tools thinks the downbeat of each drum beat should be. For instance, that one's kind of in between there. I'm actually probably going to delete that one. Notice I'm going to hold down Option and just delete that hit. I'll show you why I'm doing that here in a moment. We're basically going to use our MIDI quantize on this audio there. All the other hits look like they're pretty good. It's just that one had a double hit happening to it. So remember how I was showing you quantize with MIDI? Well, let's pull up the same menu, Option 0. There's our quantize. And I'm actually going to zoom out a little bit. I want you guys to be able to see the selection. Because when I hit apply, watch what happens. It's actually going to take the audio, and even though we haven't cut it up yet, it's going to move it over. I just quantized all that audio. If we go back and listen to it now, it's going to be in tempo with our original production. If I do Command Z and undo it, you'll see it'll go back to its original location. And if we listen to it, it doesn't sound bad. It just sounds slightly off. And I'll go back and redo it. Okay, cool. I like the tambourines. They're a little bit loud. We'll go and turn these guys down. Let's go ahead and name them too. I'm going to give them a short name, just Tam. Tambourine. Cool. And let's turn them down. Now's a good time to get an idea for the kick's going to be right up the middle. I'm going to pull the snare over off to the right just slightly. Closed hat, we'll pull it over to the left just slightly. And tambourines being stereo, that's fine, but they don't really have to be stereo. I'm actually going to pull these off to the left. And notice here, I'm not making them really hard left. We could if we wanted to give the other rhythm parts more space, but I'm just basically kicking them off to the left a little bit, and we'll turn them down slightly. Cool. Now let's go find a couple more rhythmic pieces and throw those in as well. So I've already got this selection the way I like it. We can take it back to being just the waveform view. Let's duplicate it several times. Shift, return to select back the beginning and consolidate it. Shift Option 3. Cool. Now we have it all nice and organized. It follows in unison with the other rhythmic parts. And it'll just help us for when we pace this out throughout the rest of the song. Let's go back and find two more percussive elements. You don't have to. I want you guys to have a main loop, kick, snare, and hat, and then add three more of your own choice, whatever you want for percussion. Whether it's triangles, spoons, I don't care. I just want you guys to have something else that helps us support the rhythm. Let's go find some other parts. Congos might be kind of cool. We'll go back and take a look at those. So I'm going to go back here. Let's go back to DJ Dance, going underneath percussion. I like shakers, but we already have hats. What the heck? Let's try shakers and just see if any of these sound good. I thought the shakers sounded good, and these actually are off as well. I can hear they're off, but I kind of like how these are off. I'll go back and I'll show you what I'm talking about. We zoom into the waveform, and you can see some of these are going to be behind the beat slightly. These I don't mind because if you've ever played shakers, it's hard to get them exactly right on the beat, but a little bit off the beat actually keeps that humanistic feel. And I don't want to suck the life out of everything, have everything hard quantized. So I'm going to leave the shakers. Wow, look at that. That tambourine was way behind. But we could go back and fix that. I'm going to leave it. I didn't think it sounded too bad the way it is, though. All the other tambourines are right on though. Take a look at that. Dead on. So yeah, the shaker's not too bad. We'll leave it the way it is. I'm going to duplicate it out. Shift return, consolidate. And I'm consolidating just to make it easier for me when I start pasting this out throughout the sections of the song. Let's go ahead and let's name this too. It's going to be called shaker. So we don't need the digits at the end. And we can get rid of the rest of it. One other percussive part, and then I want to wrap up the rhythm and move to, wow, time is flying. We're almost done for the night. I wanted to get to bass tonight. We might have to save that for next week. Let's go and find another piece real quick. Shakers, metallic percussion. Let's see if we can find some cowbell. All right, there's some cowbell. Now I got my cowbell, and cowbell is probably going to be slightly off as well. I'll probably leave cowbell to keep that humanistic feel just the way it is. Actually, this one looks pretty tight. There's a couple of them that are behind. I'm going to leave it though. I'm going to leave it because you can see it's actually almost behind in time with that other shaker piece, which is actually a beautiful thing. You can see those are almost about the same distance, so they're actually going to complement each other. Now, what I probably would do with cowbell, just so it doesn't start taking your head off, is I'm going to duplicate this a couple times and change up just small edits in these. You can add or take away. I'm probably going to take away, so I'm going to go in and chip away at some of these. I like that pattern, just slightly different from the original. We'll consolidate it. I'm going to go to the next bar. Ooh, there's a little anomaly. Let's see if we can hear that. That's an error by Pro Tools. See that large spike? Let's listen to it. Yeah, that's a nasty spike. Yeah, that's not good. Let's see if that happens again. Okay, cool. That was a weird anomaly. Just every once in a while, Pro Tools will do some errant stuff. That was not good. Let's listen to it, make sure we still don't hear it. Do the same thing here. Just going to edit it slightly. And I'm fine with that. That actually sounds good. Shift Option 3. We'll go ahead and duplicate over these other guys here. Actually, no, let's just make each of these slightly different. Cool. One more last edit and then we'll be done. Actually, I'm going to leave that one all the way through. That way it changes it up slightly, and we'll just go Shift Return and Consolidate. And we've got the basis for our rhythm now. Notice I also took the time, you guys heard me do it, to slightly move this stuff around. Let's call this cowbell so we know what it is. Cowbell. Cowbell, give it a hard pan. Tambourines are sounding really sibilant. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to suck some of that high end out of it because they're really crowding in. A lot of our pieces have a lot of high end content to them. So dulling them off will actually help out. Let's actually do, instead of a 1-band, let's do a 4-band. 7-band will work. And I'm just going to suck some of that high end out. Typically what I will do too is go find the nasty in here. What do I mean by that? I'm going to solo this out just so we just hear this, and let's go find, there's an offending frequency in there that's taking my head off. You guys might not be able to hear it, so let's flatten this out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to push this up, tighten it up too, and then follow it around to figure out where that nasty frequency is. So I'll go find it, and we'll be able to hear it by using our ear. And once I find it, I'm going to suck it out. It's called finding the nasty. It's not a technical term, but it's definitely used in a lot of production. Let's go and find where that is. Dude, right up in there, it's getting real ringy. There's a bit nasty right there. I'm pulling that out. There's also something in the high highs. I'm just going to get rid of it. So it makes it sound a little muddy, but it'll actually sit in with the rhythm a whole lot better. All right, cool. Awesome. Somebody said, ouch. Nice one, Michael. So I guess you guys could hear that through, yeah, it gets nasty. But you see, that's how you go find the offending frequency and just get rid of it. Sometimes it's too much. That particular sample, especially when I had a closed hat going that had similar frequencies, part of my snare, the snap of the snare probably had some in there. Definitely the shaker did, but the tambourine itself was the worst offending one. So I just went in, found the nasty, and got rid of some of the highs because we already have stuff that has high-end content. No need in choking up those frequencies. It really started to choke the rhythm. Well, there's one other piece I wanted to get to this evening. I wanted to go get to the bass. It's totally up to you guys. We can run overtime by about 5 minutes, or we could save that for next week. Next week we'll be basically wrapping up this project. The only thing we've actually even touched so far would be, all right, cool, let's go do the bass. Let's go find it and do it. Well, first of all, let's take a listen and see how this works in context with the song itself. So let's pull up the song. Let's take the rhythm parts that we just performed. Don't really need these MIDI tracks. We don't need to see those anymore. In fact, actually, let's take these MIDI tracks and let's move them. To move tracks in Pro Tools, all you have to do is grab them by the track name and then put them wherever you want them. I'm going to put them at the end, so we're not really using them anymore. They can go all the way at the end of our session. Cool. And that way it makes it easy for me to hide them too. Let's listen to the drums that we just created real quickly, get an idea for how they sound. Here's several tracks we're not using as well. It'd be nice to have these out of the way. Close off to the end. Cool. And let's copy these drums out. So here's all the drums we just created. We got our original clap, snare, kick, tambourine, shaker, and cowbell. This might not be a bad idea to consolidate these here. And the reason for that is some of these still have the old name in it. And if we consolidate them again, it's actually going to rename the track. It should, based off of the track name. Shift Option 3. There you go. It just saves me from having to go back and name them individually. That's the only reason I consolidated them again. We'll duplicate them out for the length of the track. And let's just spot check it. We can pull up our memory locations window and we can just zip through and hear what this sounds like in different spots of the song. It's on solo. All right, sounds pretty good. So let's focus in on our bass track. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to go ahead and hide all tracks except for the bass. We can get rid of our memory locations window. It's kind of in the way. So if we pull up just the bass track, we're going to solo this out. The reason we're going to solo it out is we're going to go basically mimic the bass line. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to actually do this just a couple bars at a time. Might as well find out what it's like from section to section and then just copy it. Once you find out what the notes are, and it should be super easy to do this, we can stencil out what the original notes were and then go apply our own sound to it. And then after that, we can even change it up even further. For right now, all I'm going to do is zone in on the notes themselves, or the actual parts. We're going to solo it out and take a listen. That's easy. That's 3 notes. We'll be able to find that. That's not too hard to do. So I'm going to create, this time instead of creating 2 tracks, I'm creating a MIDI track and an aux track. This time we're going to show you guys what a virtual instrument track is. So Shift Command N will create a stereo virtual instrument track. And a virtual instrument track actually is a MIDI track and an aux track combined together. There's no real need to have 2 different track types showing up in your mixer edit window. Why not just deal with one? Now, I purposely didn't show you instrument tracks to begin with because basically I wanted you to understand that MIDI's not audio. But within this track, you're going to see MIDI and audio happening, and that can be confusing if you don't delineate or understand from the beginning that they are not the same. This time, let's pull up a virtual instrument called Vacuum. Vacuum you all have as well. And this virtual instrument does nothing but create synth sounds. Lots of knobs. I love synthesizers. There's that death ball again. Hopefully it's not true death. Here's where I like to save my work and then do a file save as. Anytime I see that, I go ahead and just take care of it. Do a save as. Call this version 4. You can see I've got version 2 and version 3 there. And also in my session file backups, if I were really to get gnarly, we could actually go to that as well. Oops, still want to be in there. Okay, so we'll save this as version 4. Cool. So with this, you can see I've got a virtual instrument here. I'm not hearing it because I don't have it soloed. We can go click on the notes here. All right, so, and I've got it set up over here off to the side as well. Now with the virtual instrument track, we'll go ahead and name this bass. And I need to basically find the same notes. So I just found 2 of them. I think that's actually the notes right there. Oop, there's already a track with that same name. So let's call this M bass for MIDI bass for right now. This will probably get recorded as audio in a moment. So we'll be able to change the name again. So I think those are our notes right there. So all I have to do is just basically find those notes and pin them in. For right now, I'm just going to go ahead and record them, and I'll move them to where I need them to be. If we needed to, we could find them here in our MIDI editor as well. I have a feeling we're going to need to change this into notes view and scroll down to find the actual note value. Yeah, it's way down here. Where was I? I believe I was here. Pencil that one in. And I believe it held for... I didn't even pay attention. I'll actually have to go back and listen to it. Let's just go listen real quick. Oh, it actually goes up. Okay. So I'll go find that. So I believe that's the notes right there. Let's go back and listen to it. I'll probably have to turn one up and turn the other one down. And we are off with this note right here. This guy's right. That's basically the sound. Now, to get it to kind of sound more like what they've got going on, all I need to do is just kind of roll off on my cutoff a little bit. So if we go to vacuum, pull the vacuum back up. So let you guys hear what I just did with that. I just basically took the cutoff and turned that down. Play that over again. That's pretty much it. I believe it's going to change up several different times throughout the song, but for this one section, I'm just going to duplicate that over, and that is the bass for the beginning of this track here. It's 3 notes, so it's pretty easy. We'll go ahead and we'll play this out for you. Here, if we wanted to, I can actually take their bass out, put our bass in. Let me turn this down slightly. Now, it's not usually really fair just to pick the very first patch that you find for your bass. So since I already have the MIDI notes penciled in, you guys saw me do this earlier with the drums. And this is something I honestly do quite often. I just get the notes in place. And since the notes are there, now I can rotate through the patches and find something that may be more appropriate for the song itself. So we'll go ahead and play it, and I'll try switching up some of the patches. We can also view the vacuum from the edit window here if I wanted to, so we'll go ahead and do that. And to change the patches, I'm just going to rotate through. Right now, we are in the leads category, so maybe we should go down to bass and try this very first bass patch, and I'm just going to try rotating through these. And that's just too low a register, so let's go back up to leads then. It's kind of a cool sound. I don't think it's going to work in context with the music. That might actually work pretty good. Let's take a listen with the song. Cool. So what I would normally do at this point is probably even change up the pattern. We've actually got to go through and make sure, because you can tell just by looking at the waveform, there's something changing here. So I'm going to need to go in and write the new section for there. But I have a sneaky suspicion I can duplicate this all the way up to that section and it doesn't change. if we want. Let's go back through, unmute this, mute mine, and actually take a listen. But I'm pretty sure that from here to here, so the waveform doesn't change a whole lot. And another reason why we created the markers, because we can see through the chorus section. There you go. Look, the bass changes in the chorus. So we're going to have to go and change that. But I tell you what, we're starting to run out of time. Let me save my work where I'm at right now. Let's open it up for some questions you guys might have. I'm glad we got around to getting the bass at least settled in to where we can work on it next week. Next week, what you're going to see me do is keep the same notes, but actually change the pattern of the notes to give it more of a rhythmic feel in the bass. Any questions so far? It's kind of a lot to take in tonight, I realize. We haven't even gotten back to, we've got our main rhythm as well as accompaniment percussion. We also have those loops that we can come back in and introduce as well. I'm kind of liking the work that we already did with the sections that we've done so far. Maybe the loops that I used, that I created earlier, we could filter those out and just use them through the intro and the outro section and not really have them happening throughout the entirety of the song. I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to wait till we get the song nailed down a little bit better. And then once we really kind of have everything done and we're wrapping things up next week, we'll have a good idea of whether we're even going to use those at all. Yeah, I know it is a lot of information, and I know we're throwing a lot of new stuff at you guys, especially with the MIDI. But this is where it starts to get really fun because now you're putting your own touch on it. Here, so far with my bass line, we've just basically copied what they've done in the past, but that's all right. We're going to be able to put our own spin on it here, so it's not cheating just because we went and found their same notes. But it does give you a good jumping off part or a good platform to get started on doing something a little bit more interesting with it. And trust me, we are. I kind of hit the tip of the iceberg, and I'm going to show you guys the rest of the iceberg next week. Brandon had a good question, and your question was, when it comes to remix, the finished bass should not be a duplicate of the original bass. I don't have a problem if you do an entire duplicate of the original bass like you just saw me do. I wouldn't want you to leave the original bass line there, their original bass. I want you to replace it with your own, but I don't mind if you go and copy it down like we have here in this portion. It's totally up to you. Yeah, nice, guys. Yeah, I appreciate the kudos. Well, if there's not any more questions, we'll wrap it up for the night. This is good. I was really worried that we were going to have to go over in time. Of course, there's a lot more I can show you guys, but I want to save it. I think we've kind of hit a point where I might have bogged you down with too much information. Again, the archives will be available about 24 hours from now, and it's not that I'm lazy, I promise you. It's just that I have to, there's two different render processes that have to happen for me to get these videos up for you guys. And then there's also getting it uploaded as well. These aren't generally very small files. So I appreciate you guys coming and hanging out tonight. I hope that this has inspired you, that you guys have gotten some new things underneath your belt that you'll be interested in. And if you have any other questions that maybe you didn't feel comfortable asking tonight, please make sure you hit me up and hang out with me. I want nothing more than for you guys to be really accomplished in using Pro Tools and getting your dreams out into the hands of other people. Thanks, guys. Have a good night. See you back next week.